Welcome to the Are We Idiots Show, where we question the status quo on society's important issues while mixing in plenty of laughs along the way. Now here are your hosts, Mark Weaver and Rich Kroll.
Hello again, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Are We Idiots Show. We are your hosts, as always, Weave and Kroller.
As always, I like when you go with the nicknames. It makes me feel young.
I had to, switch it up. Diversification is the key here, Richie. A little bit of a rainy Veterans Day here in our area. Salute to the people that have served our country. But, Rich, we always start with a tip of the day. What say you?
Before I get into the tip of the day, something funny just happened while we were testing the microphones, and it reminded me, I'm pretty smart. I may not look it.
And you'll be the first to tell us.
Last time I was tested, I had 130 IQ, which is pretty good. But I admit I don't always look it or act it. But when you asked me, how do we sound, and I said clear as a whistle, I saw that it threw you off. You're like, wait a minute. Isn't it clear as a bell?
And clean as a whistle.
And clean as a whistle. My wife, Jill, always points out how I mix anecdotes and sayings, and I just do it, but that proves maybe I'm not as smart as I'd like to be.
I could give you a few other examples of that that would prove that theorem, but
let's not go there.
But let's hear a smart tip of the day from you.
All right, this is a combo food and winter tip of the day.
You're big on the nutrition/food this year. For your 2020 has been the year of nutritional tips.
Yeah, a lot of my overweight friends have asked my advice on stuff, so it's always on my mind. So, we're getting into the cold season in the northeastern
hemisphere.
There
you go. That was great.
Thanks. And but we're also so pressed for time. We have very little margin in life. So here's two, I'll call them life hacks that can kill two birds with one stone. So most Americans, probably 150 million Americans each day, start their day with a hot, boiling cup of coffee. Am I right?
Or four in my case.
Or my brother-in-law, Ted Kenegowski, he I think has 6 cups of coffee each day. So when you have that cup of coffee, boiling hot, freshly poured,
right,
but you're also kind of pressed for time, and
Yep.
and you're hungry. Have you ever
I'm not
sat
hungry.
there?
I'm not hungry in the morning.
Well,
But
a lot of people are. Most normal people are. Grab an egg. Like, you're rushing to that virtual meeting and you have your hot boiling cup of coffee. Grab an egg and dump it into the boiling coffee. And 5 minutes later, you'll have a soft-boiled egg. If you leave it in 10, 12 minutes, you'll have a hard-boiled egg. You have your coffee and you have your egg.
And wouldn't the coffee be cold at that point?
It would help. No, it's not going to. It's literally like boiling an egg.
Yeah, but I think the coffee by 12 minutes later would be really cold, I would
Well,
think.
you could take a sip of it here and there.
Okay.
All right, now the second one. You did have time to cook some eggs, and you're going to maybe an outdoor football game. I don't know if you ever gone to an outdoor game this
Never
time of
brought
year.
scrambled eggs to a football game.
So here's what you do. You hard-boil 2 eggs.
Can't wait for this one.
You hard-boil 2 eggs.
Okay.
Hard-boiled eggs stay very warm for a long time.
That I know.
You
Yes.
put them in your coat pockets.
Hand warmers.
Now you have hand warmers, and you also have a snack at halftime.
That's genius. That is genius. I never would have thought it could, and it doesn't have to be a football game. It could be skiing. Could be anything.
Could be anything. Outdoors where you're cold or you're taking a walk, whatever.
I like that one. The first one with the coffee, I think it's going to dissipate the heat too much. So I'm not on board with that one. But I love the hand warmer ideas. That's brilliant.
Thank
Brilliant. You must have 131 IQ.
you.
Which, by the way, that boiling stuff will come into play in the idiots in a few minutes, Richie. But we want to thank our patrons, Mark Zlotnikoff, Eric Weaver, George Muldoon, Chris Barbie, Dr. Dave Nadler, Alvaro Puga, Rick Linares, Darren Tapp, Scott Carney, and Larry Helms. Thank you so much for your patronage. You keep the show going, folks, and we'd love to have more. Again, if you're out there listening and you want to support our show, go to the Are We Idiots website, go to supporting listeners. There's a link to our Patreon page, and for $5 a month, $8 a month, $10 a month, or $15 a month for the platinum, you can help us out and bring you this fine content.
Wow.
Yeah,
It is fine.
We have lots of ways to help out. And by the way, we've said this a few times in the last few months. If you're a business and you want to advertise and sponsor a show, we can get very creative in promoting your business and reading a spot that you type up. And we'd love to have you sponsor a show if you're a business. We happen to have a lot of listeners in southeastern Pennsylvania, but we have our Uruguay listeners. In the southern hemisphere. I can talk. So we have listeners all over.
Quite a contingency in South America.
and it's summer there, so that's all good. So on the show today, Idiots of the Week, I have a couple nominees, and then we're going to talk about, and the title of the show, as you probably have seen on the podcast app, is President-elect Biden, we think. At least we think he's going to be our next president, but we'll talk about that, the election results, and all the contesting that's going on currently. So it should be a fun show. Richie, are you ready to go?
I'm rock and roll ready.
Okay, so our nominees for Idiots of the Week, one comes from Japan, a place that you've been that I have not. Hokkaido police have arrested a 46-year-old... By the way, you're going to love both of these. Hokkaido police have arrested a 46-year-old man who did not pay his bill at a family restaurant in Sapporo City after a meal that extended all day, as much as 15 hours. Around 7:25 a.m., the unnamed man employed in the construction industry arrived at the restaurant and ordered a set breakfast, which included toast topped with cheese. He stayed at the restaurant through breakfast and into lunch, upon which time he placed another order. When dinner time rolled around, he made some more selections.
I love this guy.
At around 10:50 p.m., more than 15 hours later, and 8 food orders later, the man started to complain, and he called an ambulance.
What is he, a sumo wrestler?
He said, "I feel itchy all over my body." Upon the arrival of the emergency personnel, the man did not board the ambulance and tried to escape. And when he failed to pay the bill, 3,007 yen, the staff member called police. When police took him into custody on suspicion of fraud, he was in possession of around 20 yen. He's a little short of 3,000.
No offense.
He claims what is written in the arrest warrant is a lie. That's nominee number one, Richie. 15-hour
Wow.
meal.
So,
this was planned, I think.
There's a lot of ways to commit food fraud, but usually, you'd
You just skip out on the check.
skip out on the check, or you'd show up in a with a mask, which is easy during COVID, and just grab your takeout food. To be sitting there on probably 45 cameras, especially in Japan,
Call an ambulance.
for 15 hours. Then, add to it by calling an ambulance. Why don't you just call 911 and a SWAT team while you're at it? This guy's clearly in the early lead.
I figured, like, if you're going to go to the trouble of calling an ambulance, why not get in and just go away and complete the whole fraud?
and call more attention to yourself. It's just bizarro.
All right, Richie, nominee number 2, and this is weird, but even by 2020 standards. This is what got back to your egg comment. A group of people, including a man from Idaho Falls, were recently busted in Yellowstone National Park while they were trying to cook a chicken in one of the park's geothermal hot springs.
Sure, why wouldn't you?
Park authorities received reports of a group carrying cooking gear towards a hot spring. Rangers arrived and found the group had cooked 2 chickens in the waters of the spring. The Idaho Falls man was given a citation for walking in the thermal area, which he pleaded guilty. He was also given a $600 fine, and he is banned from Yellowstone for the next 2 years. I can't imagine that chicken boiled in sulfur-heated water would be very delicious. And while Yellowstone may be doing many things to improve parks for visitors, cooking stations at the geysers is not one of them. So there's your other one. I didn't realize you can't even walk outside the areas where the geysers are because it's very dangerous. I guess they have walkways. I didn't realize that, but
Very dangerous. But why would anybody on the green side of the world ever make the comment that humans are destroying the earth? And why couldn't you use a pristine sulfur-based geyser that's been in existence for 100,000 years? why can't you go cook in there? I mean, come on.
Well, that what was confusing to me is they were seen carrying cooking gear with them. So, Rich, I'll put you on the spot again. Imagine these yahoos get to the site and they have the cooking gear. They're going to cook it, but they decide instead to cook it in the geyser. Let's hear how that went with his friends.
Hey, Ralph, we're going to do a little camping trip today and have a little picnic. I brought some pork and beans. Do you have that fryer? Do you have that propane fire we talked about?
Okay, fast forward. They get to the site with the cooking gear and they see the geyser.
Earl, my bad. I completely forgot the propane cooking apparatus, but the car's 15 miles behind us. I'm starving. We got this raw chicken, 2 of them. My bad. We can eat the beans. What do we do?
Well, Ralph, we got this. I don't know. Look at that. There's boiling water popping up out of this water thing with a geyser.
God's cook stove.
I guess this is how God would cook it.
Do you think they'll care?
What harm could it do?
What about the sulfur? Is that gonna affect the taste?
Well, no. Sulfur isn't there sulfur and salt? So we're naturally seasoning our chickens.
Oh my goodness! So Richie, those are your 2 nominees. What say you?
This one's hard because they're different levels of idiocy. I got to go with the guy. People are just stupid, right? So they don't care about the environment. But the guy who sits in public view for 15 hours, spends 4,000 yen, and then calls an ambulance thinking that's going to help him get out of the situation. Mr. Yamato clearly is the idiot of the week.
Okay, and we'll send him 2,900 yen
to help offset the costs.
All right, that was fun, Richie. So we're going to talk about what has consumed all of our collective psyche over the last probably year, but particularly in the last couple weeks. The election of 2020 is now complete, or so we think. And Rich, I got to say, we don't often toot our own horn on this show, but I think we'll do it here. We're going to take a little victory lap because if you listen to our episode 91, listeners, back September 22nd is when that was released, we pretty much told you what was going to happen. We are Nostradamus, I guess, because if you listen to that show, Rich told you to ignore the polls, which pretty much turned out to be the case. And I told you that Biden was going to win and the Republicans were going to keep the Senate, which looks like both of those things have happened. We'll talk about some of the potential snafus in that. I even said, pontificate a little bit about why that was the case. And my theory is, Richie, and we're going to dig into the minutia, but my theory was on that show that decent people are just tired of Trump, and throw out the crazies on one side and the other crazies on the other side. But there's a vast middle of the country and lots of independents. And I just don't think that Trump's act played well with Midwesterners. And if you look at what happened, Trump won Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Michigan in 2016 narrowly. And Biden swung them back. And, we're East Coasters, and we're a little hard-edged, and the people on the coast are a little bit more uptight. But Midwesterners have different values, and Trump's an obnoxious New Yorker, let's face it. I think just enough Midwesterners who are nicer people in a lot of ways just said, I can't do that again. So that's my kind of macro theory of what happened, and it can't, it's pretty close if it's not completely accurate.
Well, you forgot one other prediction that we nailed was that the race would be so close that in the end, if Biden were to be announced as the winner, that Trump wouldn't go easily. He's going to challenge some of the states that were close, and that this could go on for a long time, counting ballots, recounting ballots, and ultimately to the Supreme Court, which is still a possibility. So
right.
We got that right as well.
Now, I won't take as much credit for that because Trump himself had already been saying for months that the only way he could lose if it was rigged. So, yeah, we did predict that, but So did Trump.
Well, true. The one thing I will say is, and we talked about this, Trump is his own worst enemy. I truly believe Trump could have easily won this election if he had more poise and patience and a little more charm and a little more bedside manner, and he let Biden just bury himself in that first debate, which Biden was on the path to do, but then Trump turned off a ton of people sitting on the fence, a ton of independents, where just the average American hates arrogance, narcissism, bullyishness, and I think it absolutely hurt Trump. But I hope we're going to talk a little bit about the controversy we're now in, and I'd like to add where the media really helps, potentially our own media, impact an election way more than Russian or China or any of that stuff, because I think the media had a big role in also helping Biden this time around. And I have plenty of examples. Mike Angelos, our good, staunch Republican Trump lover, had some good examples for me the other night. And I hope we're going to talk about some of that stuff, and as far as the controversy that's still left that could swing this election, potentially, but make it tougher for Biden to officially take office.
Yeah, and we will talk on some of them. I'm not sure at what level. I mean, the way I come about it is, and I've said this in other examples in other realms, it's wrong for politicians in particular, but anyone, to govern or make policy or to manipulate via extreme examples and extreme outliers. So was there election fraud? I'm sure there was, right? And do some crazies who have guns shoot up schools? Yes. Do some outliers happen with other things? Yes. Are those true statements? Yes. But do they make a difference in this case? Does the election fraud make a difference? I mean, just to give you an example, Trump is demanding recounts everywhere. Trump won Michigan in 2016 by 11,000 votes. Did you hear Hillary? And I'm no defender of Hillary Clinton. I can't stand her. But why didn't she say, I demand a recount? It was only 11,000 votes. It's less than every state that Trump is now contesting. She did the decent and graceful thing of conceding because she realized that it's not going to make a difference in the end. Yes, there may be some things that went on, shenanigans in Philadelphia, our home state. It's possible, of course. But is it going to make a difference? No. And the petulance of Trump is just disgusting.
Well, to your point, we can put this fraud potential to bed. Chris Barbie and I told Mike that we thought there could be fraud, just like you said, but why wouldn't it be on both sides? I mean, how many states were won by a narrow margin by the Republicans? I don't see anybody.
Yeah.
Are we going to recount those as well? So it seems one-sided.
Right.
And I don't think
it's completely consistent with Trump's personality. He's just a sore loser.
I don't think there's enough here to overturn this. But, the media calling for Biden won well before he did. And then there is some strange conspiracy potential around if the vote was showing 400,000 votes in Pennsylvania that Trump was ahead. How did that change overnight? So I get that there is some legitimacy to conspiracy theorists' concerns, but again, I don't see how it's slighted to just the one side enough to change the election.
And we actually said on that preview show that exactly what happened was going to happen, that Trump would appear to be ahead because all the mail-in voters were predominantly, not all of them, but a lot of them were Democrats because they were much more afraid of the virus and voting in person. It was exactly what a lot of people were saying, but we certainly said it. And here we are. Trump, thought he was going to win, and now he's disappointed, so what have you. But let's give it, just for the listeners, just as we tape this, right now Trump is down 13,000 in Arizona, 14,000 in Georgia, which was a huge upset that the Democrats took Georgia, a southern conservative state. Michigan, Trump's down 150,000, so that's over. Nevada, he's down 36,000. And in Pennsylvania, our home state, he's down 48,000 as we tape this. And there's still some votes out to be counted. Georgia is doing a hand recount. And again, it's only 14,000. And we'll talk about Georgia near the end of the show because there's a big Senate runoff coming there. But yeah, so Trump is challenging this, and it's challenging everywhere. This is a good spot to Richie. If you want to bring up anything on the fraud or the media, we can talk about that now. But my take is that these are largely going nowhere. The way our system's set up is the states are in charge of their own voting. It shouldn't be that way, by the way. To me, it's crazy that Florida could have the results within 90 minutes of their polls closing. And, Pennsylvania had to wait 3 days. And what was it? Nevada had to wait like over the weekend or something. So we should have looking forward, we should have a uniform voting policy that the states should all get together and adopt. But, it's too late. You can't take the toothpaste out of the tube.
It's a bit of a mess, but we've known this for
or
how
put
many
the toothpaste
years?
back in the tube. Sorry, I said that
Yeah,
backwards.
no, I just went with it, and I tried to ignore that mistake.
Speaking of metaphors mixed up.
So we've known all this can be a potential problem since Bush Gore, right? This is no surprise. We've had the issues 4 years ago. We've had them for 20 years. So, yeah, there would seem to be a need and a demand for a more consistent, accurate system because this is a joke. It's 2020. Right. We can track sand particles flying around the sun, but we can't get the voting consistency so that people don't have any of this controversy and concern. And but yeah, it's a bit of a joke.
So what are your thoughts on the media? Why do you think they were negligent?
We know that the majority of the media is left wing at times, if not often, far left, radical, liberal mentality, right? And they've hated Trump from the get-go because Trump wouldn't play ball and Trump attacked them. And so they've been after Trump all 4 years. You rarely saw equal press or publicity on both sides, pro-Trump, negative Trump, pro-Democratic, negative Democratic. It was pretty much pro-Democratic, negative Trump, all because of Trump's personality. The irony of this will be is the average American cannot list off one thing that Trump did well. And he had some really good programs and policies and things he got passed, but he got no credit for it. His personality lost him this election, and a lot of it played into the publicity and promotion that the left-wing liberal press wanted everyone to believe. And I do believe they had a hand in helping push the independents and the fence-sitters to Biden.
Right. Just because they continuously for 4 years highlighted his, if you call it incompetency or outrageousness or both. And that has a cumulative effect.
Absolutely.
Now, the only thing that I would push back on, because I largely agree with that, and again, I didn't vote for Trump or Biden, so I feel like I can, objectively assess. I mean, there's no doubt that the majority of the media was against him and hated him. And they probably hated him not only because of who he is, but the fact that the first woman president got, robbed by him and he barely won and he's an obnoxious personality and whatever. The only thing I'll push back is that it actually, there's a lot of right-wing media or Republican media, and most of that's on radio personalities, the Rush Limbaughs, the Sean Hannitys, Mark Levin, whatever. There's a lot of Breitbart. There's the Steve Bannons. So there is a lot of right-wing media now that didn't used to exist. I mean, probably going back a decade, other than Rush Limbaugh and maybe Sean Hannity, there wasn't anything. So it's not like Republicans voters are forced to watch the mainstream media. There are plenty of outlets, and Fox News is, maybe you call them mostly right wing, but they're not the same as a Breitbart or a Sean Hannity or something like that. But so I think yes, you're right. Definitely the middle of the country and the independents were just hammered away at how awful Trump was, and Trump fed into it. So I think your analysis is correct. All right, so let's assume that all these challenges and eventually whether Trump concedes or not. Well, by the way, what's your vote? Do you think he shows up at the inaugural?
No.
No way.
No
Yeah.
shot.
Yeah, no way. So let's assume that eventually Trump gets escorted out of the White House or whatever happens, and Biden becomes president. So what do you think? And we have a Republican runoff in Georgia, which we'll talk about. But let's assume that the Republicans keep the Senate, which is looking very likely. What do you think Biden's going to be able to do? Because you and several of my friends were worried about Biden being influenced by the left, the far extreme left. He's not going to be able to do most of what they want him to do. So how do you think he actually governs now? I mean, where do you think he tacks to actually govern? He's not going to be able to do the new Green Deal. He's probably not going to be able to raise taxes in any substantive way. I mean, what do you think he actually does? Is he just kind of like a placeholder, and we just have gridlock for 2 to 4 years?
I think we potentially have gridlock because he's also not in a state of mental and physical well-being or health to be powerful about anything. I mean, I don't see him having the energy or the stick-to-itiveness or the influence, and I see him surrounding himself with people he think are smart people that are on the same page that'll help at least make it look like he's pushing for what he promised to do to help America. We all know that at least half to 75% of all pre-campaign promises never get executed. They sound good, tell the people what they want to hear. But I think there's some true American in Biden that would want the general good for the U.S. citizens, but I don't think he has the energy or the mental capacity or the power. I think I'd love to see his entire constituents and cabinet surrounding him and understand, are they middle of the road? Are they left-wing socialists? Are they far left-wing communists? Because I think
that'll tell you.
That'll tell you a lot.
Right. Yeah. So there's a couple things that I think he will do. Everyone's talking about infrastructure, like an infrastructure bill of building airports and roads, and that's something that the Republicans could get on board with and help people that are unemployed, getting that. And a lot of people say that broadband across the country would be one place to start with that, because obviously with the pandemic, a lot of people are stuck at home. A lot of kids are stuck at home without broadband. So I could see something like that getting done. Believe me, politicians of both parties want to spend money. That's been proven out over the last 3 decades. But here's a couple things that he's hinted at doing, because these are Trump executive orders. Remember Trump, when he first got into office, he banned Muslims from coming here. Well, not Muslims, but countries that were predominantly Muslim. They're not allowed to come here, 13 countries. So the, quote, Muslim ban, I think he'll do an executive order to flip that out. Vehicle emissions. Trump had overturned the vehicle emissions standard that Obama had set. My guess is Biden overturned that through executive order. They're talking about, him doing a lesser tax break. So he had originally targeted over $400,000. Taxes are going to go up on personal, and the capital gains rate was going to go back up to like 28% or something like that, or corporate tax rate going to go back up to 28%, and then raising capital gains taxes. I don't think any of that will happen if Georgia doesn't flip in the thing. So those are my thoughts. I don't know if you have any thoughts about any of those particular executive orders. You think he'll overturn them or keep them?
I think he'll try, because every president wants to put their stamp on things I got done. Right. And if he believes they're good for the country and enough of his people are pushing him to do it, he'll try. But this leads to a bigger question that I know is a concern for you. You're a madman over the future of the federal deficit and what it means for our children and grandchildren. And arguably the biggest concern for right-wing Republican conservatives is that if a guy like Biden gets in office and then Kamala Harris and AOC influenced starts to turn us more and more socialist towards Bernie Sanders type principles, where is this deficit going to go? Right? Free tuition, more stimulus, free this, more supporting illegal immigrants or not caring, higher taxes, free, maybe then even impacting. I know I have family members that are also concerned about Social Security and how they're going to impact 401ks and IRAs and future stuff like that. So what are your thoughts on that?
So I'm of a mixed mind because over time I've come to learn, because I kind of absorb a lot of this material. I've come to learn that really both parties want to spend money. Now the Republicans will claim, and I would say the Republicans are much more hypocritical here when it comes to spending than the Democrats. The Democrats tell you they want to spend money. Republicans basically say they don't want to, but then when they get in power, they do. But what I've learned is that, all these little giveaways, whether it's, Social Security, welfare, whatever, that they add up to a lot. But this, CARES Act, we went through it on our CARES Act show. The $1,200 to individuals was a micro part of the overall spending. Most of it goes to special interest on the Democratic side and the Republican side. It goes to big businesses. It goes to corporate welfare, tax breaks, all this stuff. So what government spending mostly does is exacerbate a wealth inequality. And that has been happening over the last 25 years. And the poor are getting poorer and the wealthier are getting wealthier, because the only solution or remedy to our debt problems is more debt. And that's basically what the Fed has been promoting. And what happens is when the Fed promotes lower interest rates, artificially lower interest rates, and government spending, the people with assets benefit and asset prices go up. And you're seeing it right now with real estate and the stock market. But 50% of the country doesn't have any of those. They don't own homes and they don't own stock. So that's the quandary that we're in, because a democratic society can't go on indefinitely with 50% of the people not participating, and eventually they bring out the pitchforks. And so I think that neither party will solve the problem. And yes, Republicans scream that the Democrats are going to spend more money, but both parties have us on a really bad trajectory, albeit the Republicans have us going down at a slightly less slope. They're both bad, and that's kind of the way I feel.
So bottom line, do you think Democrats in power will increase the federal deficit more than the Republicans?
More than the Republicans? I don't know. It's hard to beat Trump. Trump has the record. Trump is going to increase the national debt in 4 years the same amount that Obama did in 8. So Republicans who are listening to this, don't give me any of your crap about how you're scared of socialism. Trump is the most socialist president we've ever had, if you count spending. And by the way, when they say Trump had these tax cuts, no, tax cuts were not paid for, and any spending by government is future taxation. It's just not recognized now. Someone has to pay that. It's on future generations. So that's my my diatribe. Is my face getting red a little bit?
It is.
Okay.
I see the veins in your forehead.
So let's talk, Richie, about Georgia, because this is where they're going to spend, the estimates are they're going to spend another $300 million on the runoff. So just to set the
Money
stage.
well spent.
So just to set the stage, the Senate is now 50. As of today, Alaska turned, and the guy Tom Tillis in North Carolina turned. So the Republicans are going to have at least 50 senators, and there's 2 slots in Georgia. Excuse me. By the time you hear this, probably they're going to announce the runoff. So it's going to be a runoff with Kelly Loeffler and Reverend Warnock and Sonny Perdue and this guy
Of the Purdue Chickens?
No, he's not. I don't think he's from Purdue Chicken. And John Ossoff. So there's going to be a runoff in early January, and this will determine if the Democrats were to somehow pull an upset and both the Republican senators who are incumbents lose, then the Senate would be tied 50-50, and Kamala Harris, who's the vice president, is the tie-breaking vote. So you could see where the Democrats, if they had the Senate and the House and the White House, they could potentially pass a lot of stuff. Now, let's just talk reality. There's still several Democratic senators that are conservative. This guy Joe Manchin in West Virginia he's basically a Republican, but he's a Democrat. So he's already said, like, we're not going to upend the filibuster, we're not going to pack the Supreme Court. So some of the more radical stuff I don't think would happen, even if the Democrats got 51 votes with Kamala Harris as the tying vote. But there is going to be a war of money and just going to be carpet bomb Georgia over this Senate runoff. So have you thought about that at all? And what are your chances that conservative Georgia, usually, except for Trump, you think they'll be able to elect 2 Democratic senators?
I doubt both.
Right.
In times of we hate Trump and how that trickles down.
Right.
Yeah, I could see one flipping. But, that's another point. I don't think America's smart enough to play the own hedge that we need. Like, okay, whatever party has the president, you want the opposite party in the Senate, just, for checks and balances.
Right.
How many people who hated Trump pulled the lever for Biden, but then would also pull, the right side for the Senate? Do you think they're smart enough to do that? Because typically, if you're voting Republican president, you're Republican down the side, and vice versa. If you vote Democrat president, you're voting for all Democrats in the Senate, whatever other offices. But it seemed like there was a lot of that going on.
Yeah.
Is that because voters are more educated?
Probably not.
Probably not. But in this case, that would play into, okay, if we have Biden, let's make sure we keep the Republican senators. So I highly doubt both would get overturned.
Yeah, and I think Kelly Loeffler is a weaker candidate than Perdue, but I think that if I were running the Republican campaign, that's exactly what I would be saying. I wouldn't even focus on Perdue and Loeffler and their personal characteristics. I'd be scaring the daylights out of the citizens of Georgia, saying, if you don't vote for the Republicans, then you may get the new Green Deal and higher taxes and, whatever else, free college, whatever Joe Biden claimed he wanted to do that he now can't do if the Republicans stay in charge. That's what I would be doing, and I think that's what should be successful in Georgia. But, hey, you never know what can happen. The Democrats thought they had North Carolina Senate seat wrapped up, and it turns out the Democratic candidate was having an affair with someone during the campaign. And it came out like 2 weeks before the election, and he lost. So you never know what's going on or what might be dug up. But that's what I would do if I were the Republicans. I would be scaring the Georgians to say, you are responsible for keeping all these crazy leftist policies from becoming law, and we're all counting on you.
Scaring the bejesus out of them?
Yeah, for sure. So that's my prediction. That's my hope. Just like my hope was that the Republicans would retain the Senate, so we'd have gridlock. So, any thoughts on that, Richie? Before we move on to one other topic on the election.
No thoughts. You were very articulate.
All right, Richie. So I want to get your thoughts on this because as a libertarian, we've talked about this on other shows. But one of the little side routes that maybe most people didn't pay attention to is Oregon had a special ballot initiative to legalize a lot of drugs.
Sure.
Heroin.
Have you ever been to Oregon or Washington?
I have not.
They walk around the street smoking weed like it's
like chewing gum,
like a chewing gum.
But they've legalized cocaine, heroin, I think meth. I don't know. There's 4 or 5 major drugs. Obviously, marijuana was already legalized there. But most libertarians believe that a lot of these drugs should be legal because, and we won't go into the depths of it, but the general principle is that the war on drugs hasn't worked. Even though they're, quote, illegal, they're everywhere. They obviously, them being illegal hasn't prevented them from getting where they need to be. Obviously, with heroin and opioids, they're everywhere, and it's a major epidemic. So why not legalize them, get tax revenue, control it, and let people be responsible for their own what they ingest in their own body. So, what are your thoughts on that? I know you're a little different from me on some of these issues, but what are your thoughts about Oregon, the experiment of legalizing all drugs?
OMG. Here's why. Right? I'm all for legalizing marijuana. It's proven not to be a violent, hallucinatory drug where people start murdering people or themselves, but there's some really heavy drugs that are scary, right? Methamphetamines, heroin. Yes, we're losing the battle on the war against those, but to legalize, that doesn't make sense to me, right? Because drug dealers that can make money off of addictions, a lot of these people do commit suicide or incredible crimes or bizarre, radical, hurtful behavior where, you don't see that with other drugs. So I think there's absolutely a major scale of difference between marijuana and some of these heavy drugs, and to legalize them, it'll be an experiment. We'll see how it goes.
Right. And I think that's the way the founders set it up, is that they would have these individual states that could had their own constitutions, could make their own things, and different slices of life for different folks. And it is it's a petri dish that we'll find out how it goes overall. I think that there's been enough evidence that what we've tried to do in prohibition of a lot of these hasn't worked. And I think there's something to be said for trying to legalize them, trying to regulate them, trying to keep the quality up. It drives out the drug dealers. When it's legal, the drug dealers will have to go somewhere else. And that's another big thing. The narco trafficking, it'll go away because there's no illicit business. The prices will come down, so we can get our drugs cheaper because it'll be legalized. So, anyhow, we'll see how that plays out. A couple other ones, Richie, before we adjourn. California tried to tell Uber and Lyft that they were not allowed to hire the gig workers, as they call them, the way they always had been, and that they had to make them employees. They put it to a vote in California, and California voters said no. They like it just the way it is. So the big government liberals in California got dealt a severe blow, and the citizens of California said, no, we like it the way it is. The drivers want it the way it is. If they want to be independent contractors, let them be independent contractors. So I was happy about that.
Makes sense to me.
Any thoughts? You don't think they should have to be employees and have to have benefits? I mean, that's the justification that these companies are taking advantage of these people and not paying them benefits, and we need to protect them and make the rules for them. I totally disagree.
I think companies and people can do whatever they want, and you have a choice to work for them or not. So,
wow, are you a libertarian deep down?
I think deep inside I am.
All right. Lastly, Rich, several other states, which you already mentioned, have legalized marijuana for recreational use, and I think the only question now is, when will all of them go that way? Because this is a tide that's been rolling onto the beach for, I guess, about 5 or 6 years now. So what's your prediction on when marijuana will be legalized across the country in every state, maybe even federally?
I would think during this next presidential term. I mean, we did a show on the legalization of marijuana. It's inevitable.
Biden's not a fan, though. Biden's from the old Cheech and Chong era, where he thinks it's a gateway.
Biden probably doesn't make it.
He probably won't know.
To year 2, whether it's mentally, physically, whatever. So he'll have no idea.
Yeah,
I think it gets legalized. The wave is too big.
Yeah.
There's no evidence that it's hurting anything. It's actually bringing in more revenue and more stability and less problems. There's no evidence to not do it.
Okay. And then lastly, I forgot to mention this on the Georgia situation. So I don't know if you've noticed, Rich, but a lot of the Republicans are not coming out and recognizing Biden and saying that he won the election. And the summation is that they're afraid of Trump's retaliation if they do. And they're afraid that, not because Trump will be in office in January, but they're afraid of this Georgia situation. And they're afraid that if they come out and acknowledge that Biden's the president-elect, that Trump will freak out and not campaign for the senators in Georgia and therefore cost them the Senate. So that's why a lot of these Senate Republicans are being mum on whether Biden's the legitimate president-elect or not, because they're afraid of Trump's temper tantrum.
I could see
It's
that.
like, but it makes perfect sense. I don't blame them. I mean, I was actually thinking that, yeah, it's kind of small. I mean, at this point, Trump's going to be gone. But no, they're worried about him screwing up the Georgia thing and ending up not having the Republican Senate, which is, it's totally a legitimate thought that he would throw a hissy fit and not help the senators in Georgia win their runoffs in January.
Yeah, let's admit it. I'm not as anti-Trump as you and some folks. I'm not a Trump supporter either, but I'm definitely not anti-Trump 100%. But he's like Tom Brady. He's not going to shake hands if he loses. He's not going to be gracious and go, okay, let me still help out my fellow man down there.
Yeah.
He's one-way Trump.
You think though he'd want to protect his legacy by not having everything overturned.
If he did, he would have behaved much different in the debates. He doesn't care.
That's true.
He's Trump. He doesn't care.
Last question: does he run again in 2024?
Well, someone was just telling me that he's right now the #1 candidate for 2024. So I don't see him coming back at age 78 or whatever he is.
Right. Well, the same as Biden, though.
But look, let's be honest. Trump loves his golf and he loves his publicity. He'll probably find Apprentice 3. He'll want to get back more in the mainstream, hobnobbing with celebrities and entertainment folks and being the man again, because he needs that publicity. I think this presidency drained him, and I can't see him coming back.
Some were speculating he might buy his own network or start his own network, and which I could see him being on all the time and wanting to do that. You think him and Melania make it? You think
they made it this far?
You think they're gonna? He's out of here. She's fired.
They made it this far, and if she got into it to begin with and stuck through it, gosh, it'd be a weird time to not keep going.
Well, we will see what happens. But next show, Rich, actually, we're thinking we may actually end up being 2 shows, but we have some fun planned. And the first time in 3 years, we're going to do something special the next show. And again, if we get a big feedback, we may end up doing 2 shows. But we're going to do an Ask Us Anything show. And this is something that Richie brought up a few weeks ago. But we're going to solicit those of you listening. Send us a question that you've always wanted to ask us. Now, keep in mind, this is not a war and peace type question. We're asking for quick hit questions that we can comment on. But if you ever wanted to ask us anything or you wanted us to comment on, send us a question, supportinglisteners@rweidiots.com. Or if you're listening and you know us personally, you can text us or email us. But for those of you who don't, supportinglisteners@rweidiots.com. Send us your questions, and we're going to read them as we're taping. And we're going to very, spontaneously, and Rich is very more spontaneous than I am, but we're going to, answer your questions directly. And again, try to make them so that we can answer them in a couple of minutes, not requiring a huge amount of explanation.
Yeah, folks, it can be serious stuff about the universe or could be absolutely ridiculous. Like, hey, if you could take a bath in something other than water, what would it be? We don't care what the question is.
Right.
Serious, fun, stupid, we'll take them all.
I like the serious ones. Rich likes the fun ones, but I guess if you've been listening long enough, you already know that. But it should be fun. I'm really looking forward to that, Richie. And as always, please remember, if what you see or hear sounds idiotic, then we're just the guys to help you sort it out. See y'all next episode. Take care.
Thank you for listening. Please download, subscribe, share, and review on Apple Podcast, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, and also our website.